Well, welcome everyone. My name is RC and I run the webinar programming here at BuildOps. I'm based in Tacoma, Washington. BuildOps itself is a headquarters in Los Angeles and also in Toronto. And before I introduce our VIP guest here, Toby, to give a little bit of context of how this particular webinar came to light, Toby is a BuildOps customer, and I was just talking to him for a while about like some ideas he might want to be wanted to share with folks in the industry, and we're just kind of going back and forth, things like that were going well or things that were challenging, what have you, and all said and done, like what he kind of like something that's been top of mind for him, and he kind of shared with me that he believes is top of mind for everyone is NFPA 70B and just like understanding what it's about, its impact, what have you. So I thought it would be a perfect topic for y'all today. So without further ado, as I see a few more folks trickling in, I'm going to introduce Toby. Toby, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Toby Mitchell. I'm president of Classic Electric and Construction. We're headquartered out of Nopomo, California, which is right in between LA and San Francisco on the beach. And then also part of Electri International. I'm the chair of the technology committee as that as well. And 70B has been a topic for us. We're primarily a service and design build contractor. So this is right in our wheelhouse for you guys that we'll get into 70B in a little bit. But there's a lot of things with 70B. Some of the key things to think about is this is shifting us from pipe and wire contractors to more of subject matter experts and how to like maintain and service the equipment, more of a preventative maintenance idea instead of fixing it after the fact. A little more about us. Classic Electric's been around for about 15 years. We got 15 service techs. We got 5 people in the office. And we have a small office out of Texas as well, but we're primarily based out of California.
Great. And so again, this is like we have structure and form for sure, but this is also going to be kind of a fluid conversation, especially if you all have questions. Again, use a Q&A, I believe on the bottom of your screen if you have questions at any time, and we'll bring them into the presentation as well. But high level for the agenda, these are the things that we'll be talking about. So just understanding the changes of NFPA and also like, why it's really important for you all to address this right now. And how is it impacting your business specifically? And this is something Toby's definitely top of mind. I know that Toby, you were talking about, you have regular conversations with one of your colleagues about this, like pretty periodically, right?
Yeah, so another electrical contractor based out of the East Coast, we meet like once a month to discuss this because we're both having a lot of challenges with the 70B changing from a recommendation to a standard, how to address it with customers and stuff like that. It's not been an issue for the mechanical industry as much as it is for the electrical industry because we've sort of always been there for them. Right. So that's one of the problems. And like I was saying earlier, it's a mind shift of everyone too to shift from bidding projects and the pipe and wire stuff to more subject matter experts, and everyone's systems are unique. So it's not like we can just stamp a cookie cutter design or process to everything.
Right. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about electrical maintenance programs. And just as a heads up, I'll mention this at the end of the webinar as well. But we're cooking up a virtual summit, which is the fancy way of saying a bunch of different Zoom webinars packaged into one day that kind of expands on this whole topic and the impact. For example, one of the things we'll be bringing in is a legal expert to help understand like specifically the language and the components of these service agreements that you'll be needing. So I'll remind you at the end of the webinar today about that, but this will be a good introduction for that summit as well. And without further ado, now we're going to be entering the world of Toby's expertise here.
So when it comes to 70B, so for you guys that don't know what 70B is, 70B is the preventative maintenance standards, the servicing of electrical equipment. And it's always been a recommendation up until 2023. That's when it became a standard. And so what that means is now people can adopt this and enforce it. So Before it was just recommended practices. Now it's a standard.
Mhm.
So people like the insurance companies and OSHA are going to take this and say, hey, this is the guidelines that you should be servicing and maintaining your equipment with.
Toby, why did it become a standard? Do you know that? Like, is there any particular specific reason or reasons that this evolved into that?
I mean, I'm sure there's some political like right ways to say it, but honestly, what it comes down to is money, right? Like equipment, electrical equipment is expensive to replace, especially now with the long lead times for breakers and switch gear and stuff like that. It gets really expensive. And then also the other thing is it's really hard, and we'll talk about this more later. The hard part for people is to understand that electrical equipment needs to be maintained because we go home every day, we turn on the lights and they come on, and we turn the lights off and they go off, and there's rarely any issues, right? I mean, if you think about how many electrical issues you've had in your house over the last 10 years, I'm sure you could probably count them on one hand, so people just forget to maintain it. They don't think about it. And it's never been beat in our heads. Like everyone knows to change the oil in their car,
Yeah.
right? But that's been beat into our heads for forever, right? Like your parents did it, your grandparents did it. It's just something that you do that you need to do. But with maintaining on the electrical equipment, you can't see the electrons, you can't see what's going on with any of that equipment. So people just don't quite understand. And like I said, they don't fail like an HVAC system will fail. Like if you're not changing the filters and you're not staying on top of your mechanical equipment, it'll fail, and those costs are really expensive, but they'll fail more than they won't because there's moving parts to them, right? Where
Mhm.
electricity is more moving of electrons. There's not a whole lot of moving parts, physical like moving parts, gears and belts and
Yeah.
stuff. Um, so that I think that's other reasons why they're saying, hey, we need to start mandating people to do this because they don't, and that leads to some problems too. The fact that it's never been a standard before, with that mindset, and so what does this mean for the customers though? Like so, and how's it going to be enforced, or what's going on with it now that it's a standard? So uh, we're seeing insurance companies are going to be the enforcement on this, right? So if your electrical system breaks and you want to go and file a claim on it, they're going to ask, well, where's your preventive maintenance plan? And have you been maintaining it, and or what standards are you maintaining it to? Um, there's also talks about the utilities before they pay out claims, for bad power, blowing up equipment, stuff like that. They're going to want to see they want to see your service plans as well, following these standards, to pay out on claims as well. I mean, that's rumor, but I mean, which we're hearing. And like I said, out of California, so I'm in PG&E territory, and they're a good company, but with all the fires and stuff like that, they're not going to pay out if they can find a loophole to get out, they're going to. So that's some of the stuff too. And then there's like the safeguards from, people and stuff like that. Like, you know, once again, we don't see what electrical equipment's doing. But when it explodes, it's a bomb basically. So they want to just make sure that it's safe and to maintain. So if someone has to go work on it, that it's in the safest, most, reliable power that it can be. And so those are some of the other reasons why that this is so important. The standard is nice though, because it does give us a guideline, especially on equipment that's older where we don't really know what the recommended practices are to maintain that. 70B does give us a guideline for that.
Great. Next slide.
Yeah, please. And so how does this impact us as contractors? The biggest part of 70B, one of the biggest parts is the mandatory electrical maintenance program. Like, so facilities have to have electrical maintenance program, and it's written in the standard, and it's what everyone's going to be going to. It does, and 70B does give us a small detail of what that's supposed to look like. But customers are going to be asking for this. They're going to be lost. They're going to need directions. And so that's where you can step in as a service matter expert and help offer, your guidance and stuff like that. And so And who better, especially if it's facilities of long-term customers, like their facilities really well. So it's going to be good to reach out. Even if they hire a third party to write it, there's opportunities for you to help review it and make recommendations and stuff like that. So that electrical maintenance program is nice because it gets our foot in the door. And like I said, it makes us subject matter experts. So we're in there. So they're not going to be calling other people to get bids and stuff like that. Um, Increased scope of work. This includes through documentation and record keeping. So there's going to be more than just, pulling wire and adding an outlet or a light. There's going to be a lot more documentation that's required. And that documentation is key. That's going to be the most important part of this whole thing is documentation. Make sure that you have some way to organize that documentation and reference it quickly is going to be key. And for us, we're a build ops users. They have their service and maintenance agreement, and then the way they can store information on properties and equipment, which they call assets, is great. So that we can go click on an asset and look at all the history that's done to it, the recommended services and stuff like that. So documentation is key on all this stuff. And
Is there obviously I encourage everyone to use build ops for this effort. But if they're not using build ops, right? Like what is another way that is a little bit more accessible to them for documentation and record keeping? Is it like literally like Microsoft Office? Is it Google? Like are there ways? Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean you could build these in spreadsheets if you want. I mean for us we try to be as technologically advanced as possible. So like when people say I have stuff on spreadsheets, I just hear that they're still on pen and paper, right? So but it works. Like I know some people that do really well with Microsoft. They with their Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that, they can search and get the information. So no, you don't have to be using a software platform like BuildOps, but it does make it really easy. And like the thing with Excel spreadsheets is you got to make sure the guys have it in the field also, right? So there's two parts to this. So one is when your techs are out there doing their service and their maintenance, their preventative maintenance, do they have access to all the documentation on that facility or on that asset going back, however long you've been working there, and or are you printing out spreadsheets or are you giving them, access through Teams or something like that so they can access it through there? It's just, how much time are they spending trying to get that information to search through that, is key. And then if something happens or if someone calls and wants, if a customer calls and says, hey, my insurance company is asking for, the service reports for the last 2 years on this equipment, how quickly are you going to be able to get it? And like I said, you can do it in Excel spreadsheets, but for us, it's easier to use it in a software platform that's there, especially your service and maintenance, and then you have just your regular service work that's going on there. So for us, like it's all in one platform versus having to like make sure someone goes and adds it to that spreadsheet. Does that make sense? But it all can be done in a spreadsheet without any problems.
Right, for sure.
And so the next step to documentation is if you have the service and maintenance agreement on a facility, even if another contractor is doing work there, you're still going to be involved in it. And you're going to need to make sure they get their documentation. So for example, we have a large shade structure that has a lot of electrical equipment on it. Well, they went and put solar on it, and the solar company does a really good job, but when they change inverters and stuff, that their documentation isn't strong. So we have to go in and add all the documentations for those repairs that they do and stuff like that, which sort of brings us back into the front of that customer. So that relationship is stronger with the customer because they know that their subcontractor is just not doing what they need to be doing. But that's all on record keeping stuff, right? And so even though we're not actually doing the work, we're still recording it and stuff like that. And then the next line item we have here is need for regular inspections. Now, this is where it gets tricky because nobody really knows what is needed for regular inspections. And NFPA 70B does a good job, and it says, okay, if the equipment is this it's, if you feel it's in this condition, you check it every few years. If it's in worse shape, you check it more periodically. So I know this is what caught us, like, we didn't know how to go about this, right? And so our very first service contract that we did, we just went in and assumed that everything was perfect and then made recommendations from there. So some of the stuff will say that you need to inspect every 6 months. Some says you need to inspect it every 5 years, but it all depends on the equipment, how important it is to the customer's operation. And there's other factors like, does it have large breakers that have large lead times or something like that? That makes you want to check it more and more. So, like I said, this all depends. Like, standards are, you got thermal every year, but if the equipment's in bad shape, you might have to thermal every 6 months. And then additional training and certifications, like, remember that we're moving away from the pipe and wire stuff, and we're moving into more subject matter experts. And so that requires more training and certifications and stuff. And it's more training of not just your crew, not just your field personnel, but also your office staff. Because when the customer's calling and asking for reports or something like that, you're going to have to make sure that your office is trained on how to get to that stuff quickly. And potential increase for revenue. This is what we call pull-through work. I mean, HVAC, fire, sprinkler guys, alarms, they've been killing this for years. I mean, they have whole business models after this. And with 70B, it's letting us electrical contractors have this chance to do the same. Yearly agreements set for future scheduled work, right? We can use it to fill in dead times, like, especially us being primarily service and design build. We don't have large projects that can keep guys busy for a long time. So having these service agreements is nice to fill in for those dead times. And then you also are going through, you're inspecting, and you document all the problems, and then you give it to your customer and say, hey, these are the issues that we have that need to be fixed. But the key is all this is making sure that you are a partner with your customer, right? Because it's going to be easy to say stuff's broken or give it a worse rating than it really actually needs to be to increase revenue. And the customers are going to see that. I mean, I guarantee, I know our customers are really smart, and they look at all that. And that's why they come to us, is because they know that they can trust us, and we're not going to be trying to sell them a bill of goods that they don't quite need. But it's great. And like I said, when you're the first person there, when they think of something electrical, they don't even call anybody else. They don't ask for quotes. They don't do any of that. They might ask you for a not to exceed price. They might ask you for a budgetary number. They might ask you to quote something, but they're not asking you to quote something and then sending it to 5 other contractors to quote it as well, right? So plus, the system. So how can you the system better than anybody else. You know how the whole thing's built, right? Because you've been there servicing it. I know we were installing an EV charger, and we were going against the electrician who actually built. It was at a car dealership, and we were going against the electrician who actually built the car dealership, and they blew our number out of the water. But they knew where everything was. They knew there was a spare conduit. They knew exactly where it was. They knew that it was there for future EV charging, where we had no idea. So we were planning on piping all the way back from the panel, and so we didn't even have a chance, because they had all this information that we didn't have, right?
Makes sense.
And so, yeah. And so there's where your potential increase of revenue comes from, is, pull through work and just, being the only person they call. So, yeah, so MEPs is electrical maintenance program. Like I said, this has to be written for every facility. And every customer is pretty much customized, right? Like, I get there's only a handful of equipment manufacturers out there, your Schneiders and your Eatons and ABBs, but there is the way they have them set up, the fault currents, all that stuff is all it's custom. And so they're going to have to need it. And so they're going to need someone to help them write this, or at least guide them on what it should include and stuff like that. That's where it really comes in, that 70B helps us get in front of the customer. It's also required of 70B, like, you have to have this. It prevents electrical failures and reduces downtimes. I mean, that's the other big thing is, you know, if something's down, can we predict that and keep that, keep those downtimes to a minimum, right? Can we be proactive and say, okay, we'll shut down for 4 hours and change out this breaker, instead of being down for, 2 days while we're searching for a breaker to replace it with or something like that. It can extend the life of the electrical equipment, which just anytime you take care of something, it's going to last longer. Minimize legal and financial risk for the contractors and clients. So that's where the webinar in August is going to be great, right? Because we'll really get to see where we're at from a legal standpoint as well.
Yeah.
And then also these electrical maintenance plans, they're also living documents, right? Every time they have a change to their electrical system, it needs to be updated. And then also 70B says that it has to be updated every so often as well. And so it's not something where you just write once or you help the customer write it once. It's something that needs to be reviewed periodically and updated. And of course, like all of our other codes in 70 or NFPA, they change every 3 years, right? So we're going to have to go and revisit all these programs every 3 years anyway, just to see if there's been changes to the 70B standards.
Before we move on to the next slide, I know the poll has been up for a little bit now, and I'm going to be ending it shortly, but just in case you didn't have a chance to answer that poll, I know Toby mentioned briefly about the value he found in BuildOps and for service agreements and managing documentation like that. So if you are interested in hearing a little bit more specifically about how teams are using that, feel free to hit the yes, and we'll follow up with you on that. Otherwise, I'm going to shut down that poll in another about 10 seconds, just so you all know. Anything else on this particular slide?
No, I think we can move on to the next one.
Cool.
And so challenges with maintenance programs and 70B in general, like we're struggling with it a lot. Like I said, we've teamed up with a contractor on the East Coast to just talk it out. And I mean, if you're not part of any peer groups or something like that, I suggest you guys get in with one just to talk it out and shoot ideas around. Because right now 70B is new, so there's little enforcement, right? So I have some customers that just ask what the fines are if they don't implement this, and they'd rather just pay the fines. And then they say, well, who's going to actually enforce this? Like who are the 70B police coming over and telling me that I have to do this? And so it's hard. So that's a struggle. Record keeping is key, right? Like I'm gonna say, I'll be honest with you, with everyone on this call. My crew is guilty of not labeling panels, right? We go and add a new circuit and they forget to put a label saying they added this circuit, or they forgot to put the label in the panel. I mean, of course the guys get busy. They're not doing it on purpose. It's an accident, but to miss a label inside a sub panel, it happens. But to miss some reporting documentation, 70B is not easily caught because there's just a lot of information in there, and it could be potentially not dangerous, but just bad, like if we're not on top of it. So documentation, record keeping is key. The other thing is, if your office is spending a ton of time researching, trying to find the information, that is going to cost you more money, right? It's more hours spent in the office, which increases your overhead. If they're looking through spreadsheets or something like that, to try to get the information. So that's why record keeping is extremely important. Plus, we all know insurance companies, they love documentation, they love paperwork, right? So that's why it's so key to make sure that you have the proper documentation, everything out there. That's easy to find. Educating clients on the importance of this. This is where it's hard because we don't want to sound like used car salesmen, right? Like this is important that they need to have it. But we got to get out there and educate them and let them know, like, hey, here's what's coming. Here's what's coming up on the future. Here's who's enforcing it. Here's what we think. Here's our suggested plans for you guys and stuff like that. And then it's also more of not just educating your customer, your key contacts, but making sure you're educating other people. If you can get a hold of the CFO of a company or whoever's in charge of the financing for budgets and stuff like that, it's good to get in front of them. They'll love this type of stuff. Hey, we can budget for this type of stuff, then they like it. They like it a lot better than the surprises.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. So there are ways to frame this in a way that your particular audience will be like, oh yes, this is a value prop. Like this is actually a benefit to me as a result. So like if for a CFO or what have you, like, yeah, that consistency, the understanding of like this is what I'm going to be paying is a value. Like that's actually a good thing for them.
yeah, exactly. So we have one customer where we're like our direct contact, and he straight up said, "Why would I pay you quarterly for the service when something breaks, I just call you and you're here? Like, why would I pay you quarterly for that when I could just call you when it's broken?" But then when I have a conversation with the controller, he's like, "Wait a minute, I can just pay you quarterly and I can set this up as a budgetary item." Like, oh, this is great. Like, no, I don't have any surprise expenses throughout the year. I mean, he's still going to, but it's less. So it's funny because you talk to two different people and they look at it two different ways.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, for like the controllers and stuff, they love this, right? And they're already used to it because they're used to it with the HVAC side, they're used to it with the fire sprinkler side, their alarm monitoring and stuff like that. It's just the electrical is new. Um, and I've heard some contractors say, "Oh, well, if you sign up for this service and maintenance plan, with 70B, we will make you a priority." When that's hard for us because all of our customers are priority. So how do I go tell an existing customer like, "Oh, unless you pay me, you're not going to be a priority anymore," right? They're going to say, "Well, we'll just find someone else anyway." So that's why I say it's harder. Because with the existing relationships, now any new relationships, you can add this right into it. And if any of the people listening are do construction projects, the build projects, the large stuff, I would encourage you to take someone from the company and offer this at the end of the project. Hey, here we can maintain your equipment for you, which you're going to need for your warranties and stuff like that. And here's a sum of, pay us quarterly, monthly, yearly, or whatever to maintain your equipment and stuff like that. Come in once a year, do thermals and stuff like that. Like I said, which you're going to need anyway, but then you're already there at that new building, which will lead to a bunch of pull through work because anyone who builds a brand new building already knows like it looked good on paper, but once it's built, they want to put their desk somewhere else, or this piece of equipment's in the wrong spot, it needs to move. So there's always, additions and stuff being done after the building's completely built. So those are just some of the challenges. It's really just getting the customers to understand what this is. And it's a fine line of trying not to scare them into it, versus just knowing that you're their resource for this. Like this is something they're going to have to do and it stinks, but you're there to solve all their problems, help them navigate through this easily. And the 70B is definitely not as big as our 70E or our 70, which is our electrical code. But it is a tough read, but I suggest everyone to get a copy and read through it. And then the other big challenges back like with enforcement, like outside of our Texas office, I think there's a county out there and they're still on the 08 electrical code where the 70B actually becomes part of our electrical code as enforced with our electrical code as well, in the 23 edition. So here I am in California, that 23 edition will probably get adopted in 26 and actually enforced or become enforceable in 27. So we do have a little bit of time here, but all places are different on how they're going to enforce this. But like I said, a lot of this enforcement is going to be from the insurance companies and possibly OSHA if there's ever like a major injury or hazard or death or something like that, is when they'll come in and say, "Where's your safety plan for your electrical equipment?" But primarily it's going to be the insurance companies. And like I said, we're starting to see it more with new projects. Like that's why I'm saying if you're doing new projects, it's an easy sell to get in there. But like that shade structure that has some solar on it, for example, that one, the insurance company said, "We're not going to insure this unless you have your maintenance plan in place." Right. So, and it's funny because I've been trying to sell that customer on a maintenance plan for a few months, and they just kept saying, no, we don't need it, we don't need it. And then when the insurance company said they do need it, now we got the shade structure on a preventative maintenance plan, and we're looking for the rest of the facility to do.
Wow. This actually brings up, so this is a reminder again for that summit that we're doing sometime in a couple of months, August or early September, where it expands on this. So I think that one of the sessions that we will be doing is we'll be focusing specifically on how to educate your clients and figuring out like whom to talk to and what to say when we talk to them. But I encourage you all, again, the Q&A is open for you all if you want to let us know like what should we be talking about during this summit. The agenda is definitely still very much fluid and flexible and open to input from you all. We want to make sure that it answers most of your pressing questions and concerns for sure. Anything else on this slide, Toby?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. Yeah. So that in the end, like, just again, so in a couple months, we will be doing a virtual summit. Toby will be on the virtual summit. We got a few other people lined up as well. Fred Sargent, if you all are familiar with him as well, who are going to be kind of going deep dive into specific subjects and topics. So that way we can really go deeper into some of these things. So I will also be emailing you. Again, my name is RC. I will be emailing you either by the end of today or potentially tomorrow the recording of this webinar as well as the slide deck. And then you can feel free to just reply back and let me know if you have any questions, follow-up, things for Toby, ideas for the virtual summit. We do have a question coming in right now. And by the way, I know we're at time, so you all can hop out again. You'll get the recording of all this. But Toby said he will stay on for a little bit longer if there's any questions that you all ask. So Toby, from Adam, is what tests need to be performed on electrical breakers and what size of breakers need these services performed on them?
So an NFPA 70 is pretty, it just says all breakers, right? And a lot of it is going to be for your smaller breakers, it's going to be thermal, mainly thermal, and then exercising to make sure they're mechanically in good shape. When you get into the larger breakers, then you're going to have to, do some of your ground fault testing and stuff like that. 1,000 amps or larger is typically what the NEC or the NFPA 70 code says for that type of stuff. And this is where it's like I'm still trying to figure it out. Like there's some stuff that says it has to be NETA certified testing. And some people are saying like, well, as long as you have the equipment, you're fine. So it's still sort of up in the air, but I would also make sure if you guys don't have a NETA certification, maybe look into getting someone NETA certified or partner with someone that is a NETA certified tester to partner with for those times where you have to come. The testing of those breakers, it all depends on the condition and what effects that breaker has on the facility, right? If it's a 4,000 amp main breaker powering up an entire facility, you might want to be testing that breaker, every 3 years versus every 5 years, right? Just because of what it controls, right? If that breaker goes out, your entire operation is down. So, but for the most part, with the most small breakers, as far as I can understand with 70B, it's a lot of just, thermal and exercising.
All right. Any other questions before we end it?
But that's the one thing with 70B. It's a good guide, but there is no, like, if you're looking for a written out plan that says this is exactly how it's supposed to be, you're going to struggle trying to find that, right?
Is that an eventuality though? Is that?
I think maybe, but I mean, we're probably talking 30 years before that's going to be something at that point, and the thing is, like, all buildings are so different, right? How do you write a complete standard? Like, we don't even have a standard maintenance on a vehicle.
Right.
Like, I mean, we know how to change the oil, but my father-in-law, he's got a Mercedes SUV, and he was all mad that the mechanic wouldn't change the transmission, but it's a sealed transmission. There's nothing to service on it. So, where like our Ford trucks, our service trucks, they all have, filters, and they're just like regular cars. So, it's hard to say like if they're going to come up with a complete standard because everything is so different.
Right. Makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate that. Again, look out for an email from me. I'll be sending you the deck, the video as well, and some more information about the virtual summit as well that will be happening in a couple of months. Other than that, Toby, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. and we'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye all.